think we can trace a lot of that leverage increase to what's been happening in the real estate market. And for a few reasons. So firstly, real estate being a very large sector within China, obviously the slowdown there has a negative impact on nominal GDP growth. So that helps to push leverage higher. We've also seen the effects this has had on local government financing because local governments rely heavily on land sales for their revenue. So with that channel really kind of having slowed, they need to borrow a little bit more. And then thirdly, we've seen the private sector deleveraging in the real estate segments, right, in terms of property developers, in terms of mortgages. So that also has had the government pushing the government leverage higher as well. Now, despite this increase in leverage, we think it's by no means unusual because if you look at other economies which have had a big real estate bust, like in Japan or in Europe or in the US, we've seen after the real estate bubble burst, the private sector leverage tends to stabilize or fall, but the public sector leverage increases. And if you map what's been happening in China to some of those economies, actually is on a fairly similar track. So we think this increase in leverage is by no means unusual.
What about the idea of Chinese authorities buying up unsold homes? And obviously this is part of their property sector cleanup, but that can actually stress local government debt. What can transpire from that?
So from our perspective, looking at what's happening in the real estate sector, we see what policymakers are doing right now is more towards risk containment. And so what we mean by that is they're trying to contain a lot more of the risk emerging and probably to solve the issues over a long period of time. Because if you look at between 2001, 2023, we have seen quite a sharp decline in terms of property developer debt outstanding. But that has started to creep up again, and much of that is from policymakers encouraging the banks to make sure that credit flows to the sector so that homes get delivered. So we think they're now in containment mode. Now, what we think is important going forward, if they are to speed up the cleanup of the sector, is actually to try and take up and soak up and remove some of the inventory. And so if there are government policies directed more towards cleaning up the excess inventory in the real estate sector, we think that's a positive development. But obviously, we're still watching to see if there's going to be any major plans to do that.